Hey folks, this is Kelani. Classic World of Warcraft might be a bit further along than we anticipated, with a beta opening up very soon. There are huge nerfs coming to some endgame bosses with the next reset, and I mean huge. And then there's also some curious little Murloc Vendors on the public test realm, which might be involved in some future secret hunting. Let's take a closer look. Now, Murlocs haven't always been the friendliest of creatures, and if you play back in vanilla, you probably died to Murlocs more than anything else. Or maybe that was just me, but anywho, it seems that the factions are making friends with pretty much everybody down in Nazjatar, and Cohen, Makrura, Kelfin, and Sea Giants, so I guess a Murloc or two can't be that bad, right? If you happen upon this colourful chap out in the world, he'll give you a quest to take him home. Now, it doesn't really mention whether that's his home or your home, and apparently it's your home because he follows you back to the new questing hub and gets quite comfortable in a little corner. He then gives you a quest to buy some other bits and bobs off the other Murloc vendors, but I assume this is just a lead up to what the vendors actually do, kind of introducing you to it, so to speak. If you took part in the Hive Mind secret puzzle, you probably remember the trading vendors down in Vashia. These Murlocs work in the same exact way. You buy one item from one Murloc and trade it for something else with another Murloc that you trade for something else with another Murloc, and you keep going and going. If you keep going, you'll eventually end up with some uncommon items and then rare items. The simple fact that we have another set of trading vendors that you have to go back and forth between tells me that something here is going to lead to a secret. Thankfully, these Murlocs are relatively close to each other and not half a zone away. These items all have a one-day time span too, to give you just enough time to run around looking for things to interact with. With how random all of these items appear to be, they could lead to anything. We do know one thing they lead to: special rewards. Can't really say much else because we don't have much else to work with. If you talk to Murl again, that's the Murloc you brought home, you can see he has something weird in his vendor window. Trader Game Reward 2. I didn't think too much of this when I first saw it. I figured it would be a one-time reward that hasn't been implemented yet, but then I checked back today. The first time I talked to this Murloc, he didn't offer number 2, he offered number 7. I did a little bit of digging and it seems as though this Murloc has at least 8 different rewards which rotate on a daily basis. If you get all 8, you might be able to put them together to continue on to something else, or that could be the end of it. That might be the reward after you put all 8 together. Who knows? I am super excited to see what this reward ends up being, and it seems kind of straightforward when it comes to obtaining them. Buy and trade the correct items and then buy the daily reward. Come back the next day to do it again for the different reward until you collect them all. But there's something else which affects what these Murlocs will trade you. If you watched one of my previous videos where I talked about the catch-up gear down in Nazjatar, you might remember that one of the benthic cloaks allowed you to see Murloc Trader special wares. Well, I got that cloak for myself, but let me warn you ahead of time, it doesn't make any more sense when you put it on. In fact, I only have more questions. Without the cloak, you can buy and trade for any items up to the rare quality. When you have the cloak equipped, a new epic quality item is available from each Murloc trader. These, of course, require some trading to get your hands on them, but I haven't seen any of the rewards from Murl require the epic quality items. So what are they used for? It's actually frustrating that the PTR is still in the early days of the testing cycle because we might find out what this does later on, but if it really is tied to a secret, they might be keeping the rest of it under wraps until the patch hits live servers. I know they've done that for previous secrets so they don't get spoiled before the patch has properly released, so I guess mark this page in the patch 8.2 handbook. There's probably a secret out there tied to these Murloc traders, and we'll find out what it is eventually. Let's have a chat about the raid nerfs, because this is pretty interesting as well. Now, when I say these are huge, I mean anyone struggling to get over the last little hump there on some of these fights will probably be gifted a victory on a silver platter when these nerfs go live. Just as a quick reminder, they aren't active just yet. These changes will happen with your region's next reset. So that's Tuesday for North American realms and Wednesday for the European realms. The first round of nerfs we have are for Jaina. This isn't too surprising, a lot of guilds have gotten to Jaina on Mythic but haven't managed to secure their cutting edge spot just yet. The first change is to Bombardment in Phase 1. This is the explosions that leave behind patches of fire. They're going to be less likely to drop on one of the ballistas if players aren't nearby. This is a really nice change and should hopefully make for some smoother Phase 1 progression. Chilling Touch now begins stacking again in Phase 3 when Arcane Barrage is interrupted instead of when Thanos is freed. This is absolutely huge and does two major things for the fight. The first thing is that you get to decide when to start the burn phase of the fight. Usually you were forced into a strategy that ignored the elemental and you just tried to bum rush Jaina's health down before you all died. Now you can take things a bit slower because there's no worry about having to DPS down an entire raid's worth of ice blocks. You can free Thanos, kill the elemental and get ready for Phase 3, and then kick Arcane Barrage to start the DPS timer. The second major change is that you can actually kill the elemental now, which should make Phase 3 even easier. Another change for Phase 3 affects the prismatic images. They now spawn closer to Jaina instead of being centered around the area. A good change, even if it's rather minor compared to that last one. Icefall is also no longer going to coincide with the full power gathering blizzards, which reduce your visual radius. This is another massive change. I can't tell you how annoying it is to have the blizzard come up and then have an icefall that you can't see just destroy your entire group. You could somewhat get around this by having shamans and hunters use their eagle eye ability, but then you also have to rely on those players making a good call. Either way, this change should make Phase 2 quite a bit neater. Gathering Blizzard and Freezing Blood should now be more responsive in Mythic difficulty. That's a good change, but should have probably been addressed already if this was a major concern, surely. I know we've had a few players frozen without actually being frozen, so maybe that will fix this particular issue. And then we also have a 5% health nerf for Jaina, which should speed up pretty much every phase. With all these nerfs combined, I fully expect a lot of guilds to get their cutting edge this coming week. There's also some changes to the 2 Crucible of Storms bosses. For the Restless Cabal, Void Crash and Crushing Doubt now prefer ranged targets. I have a bit of a problem with this kind of thing because melee often get the easier job in most raid encounters, but for these types of fights it causes so many issues for melee when they actually get these abilities that guilds were opting to bring a surplus of ranged DPS just because they handle the mechanics easier. Now that melee shouldn't see those abilities as often, a melee heavy composition should have less troubles meeting the DPS checks. Witness the End's duration was reduced to 7 seconds down from 9 on Mythic difficulty, so you should be able to pop your ads a little bit faster with those extra 2 seconds of grace period. The Restless Cabal will also see a 5% reduced health pool overall for Mythic difficulty. Not quite as game changing as the Jaina nerfs, but with this raid being quite new still, that's not all too surprising. This might give some guilds a little bit of confidence going into the Crucible of Storms though. I know a few guilds who are working on Jaina Mythic that won't even consider touching the Crucible of Storms yet because of how brutal the 2 fights are. Wait for nerfs, they say. Well, here you go, time to get cracking. And Unat also has a handful of changes. Void Crash will prefer ranged targets on this fight as well, so once again melee can have an easier time throughout this encounter. Insatiable Torment now prefers damage dealers. That's a pretty important change, especially when you consider that you can start to sacrifice people if this gets too out of hand. A DPS dying isn't the end of the world, but if your healers go down, that can create quite a few more problems quite quickly. Piercing Gaze of N'Zoth duration was reduced to 4 seconds, down from 5 in Mythic difficulty. This is the beam that cuts across the area, where you want to move through one beam, wait for the debuff to fall off, and then go through the other. Stacking this debuff is pretty deadly, so it's nice that it lasts for 1 second less. Undying Guardian's health will be reduced by 17% in Mythic difficulty, quite a decent chunk of that ad's health pool for sure. The number of players that are targeted by Unstable Resonance has been reduced to 12 per cast, down from 18. That's a pretty significant nerf and should make this fight quite a bit easier to handle when it comes to that specific mechanic. And then, as with all of the other bosses, Unat will also see a 5% reduction to his overall health pool in Mythic difficulty. quite a large round of nerfs when you look at the big picture, but especially for Mythic Jaina. I would love to compare how many guilds have cutting edge right now versus how many will get it after these nerfs go live. I think a few of these changes actually tidy up a fairly messy fight, and possibly should have been introduced earlier on. With how random the fight can be, it's not unusual to just get unlucky and have a bad pull. I don't really like when boss encounters do that. RNG shouldn't be a huge part of how the encounter unfolds as a whole, but removing some of the randomness while making the fight numerically easier is going to lead to a lot of kills, in my opinion. That's all for the raid nerfs, but what about this classic WoW news? The last we heard from the classic WoW team was to expect a summer release. I guess summer does go on for quite a few months here in California, but one has to wonder when exactly we'll see the WoW Classic servers go live for the first time. Again, we know that the Friends and Family internal alpha has started up a few weeks ago, and things might be progressing quite fast because a number of content creators, mostly Twitch streamers I think, were invited to Irvine to have a chat about something. Quite a number of chaps invited are riding the classic hype train pretty hard, so it's not too much of a leap to assume that's what it was all about. If you remember, a handful of content creators were invited to Irvine to preview patch 8.2 before it went onto the PTR, so I guess this might happen a bit more in the future for the really big announcements or data drops. After the community members were done in Irvine for patch 8.2, the patch announcement came very quickly afterwards, so I would expect to see an alpha or beta announcement for classic servers sometime in the very near future, or at the very least, we're gonna get some classic news. Maybe it's a delay, maybe everything's on time, but we'll get something solid for sure sometime soon. And that's all we have for this video. What do you think the Murloc Vendors could end up rewarding? Do the raid nerfs affect you at all? Are they going to allow you to get that much awaited Jaina kill? And how do you feel about Classic WoW? Is it something you'll dip your toe into now that it's an official Blizzard server, which makes it easy peasy to swap between both clients, let's be honest? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.